Stage to bring in someone who's been with us just
Yes.
mere moments ago. He's in our South Florida newsroom. He is Javier Manjarres, the managing editor of the Shark Tank political blog. Now, Javier, we just had Dick Morris in here, and he says, look, Jeb Bush has gotten a quick start, but Mitt Romney's going to hang back, and if Bush has problems, then look for a Romney candidacy. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Why would Mitt Romney get in now? Jeb Bush, he's all the talk right now, and let him be. I don't think this affects anyone on the conservative side either. But Mitt Romney has the money. He has the built-in infrastructure, fundraising infrastructure, so he can hold back. He can wait till middle of this year. So I kind of agree with Dick about that.
Where would you put your money, Javier? Bush or Romney?
Don't answer me that question.
Oh, come on.
I'm on the fence. How's that?
Oh.
Actually, you know what? Right now, I respect both men, but I'm not going to come out and say who I support because I think there's other candidates need to be heard from, like potentially Marco Rubio, Senator Ted Cruz, even Rand Paul. So again, it's way too early, I think.
Well, funny, or perhaps not so funny, you had mentioned Marco Rubio. Now,
Right.
he weighed in on a recent presidential decision or indecision. Let's listen to Senator Rubio and then talk about his future.
I thought it was a mistake not to send someone. Look, I understand when the president travels, he brings with him a security and communications package, which is intense. And I understand you drop that into the middle of something like this. It could be disruptive. But Eric Holder was in Paris, and maybe John Kerry should have gone, or somebody else, or a plethora of people they could have sent. I think in hindsight, I would hope that they would do it differently.
So Marco Rubio in studio with the crew of CBS this morning. Got to ask you, Javier, we also have heard comments that Senator Rubio has run the possibility of a presidential campaign past his family, and they're fine with it. Is he really going to move forward in 2016, or does he covet the Senate seat to stay put where he is?
Listen, I think at the end of the day, the person who makes the final decision is the boss of him, which is his wife, Jeanette. Again, how she goes, so does his presidential aspirations. But look, from what I understand, yes, he talked to his family. They may have given the go-ahead. But also remember, Marco, just like everyone else who's running for president this year or next year, has a book out, is out to peddle the books. As a matter of fact, since I actually have written a book, I may even run for president myself. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But again, as far as Rubio, I mean, either way, I think for the most part, I think maybe he may not even run for president. Maybe he stays for Senate, and maybe 2018 runs for governor. He's always wanted to be governor of Florida, and that would keep him in the state and make his wife happy.
Now, you mentioned writing a book. You're not thinking of running, though, right?
I may be running. Actually, I'll announce right now, I'll run away from that question as fast as possible.
But talk about the importance of book tours, because it seems like
Right.
every potential presidential candidate out there is having one right now at the moment. Why is that?
Well, look, it's name recognition. They all have they have name recognition to some degree, but putting out a book, obviously, whether they're in it for the money, to make the money off the book, so be it. I really don't care, but it's to elevate themselves for political, and again, this is all political expediency on all their parts. Look, Ted Cruz is coming out with a book. It's just about done. Rubio's out the next week. I'm waiting for Rick Perry's book to come out. I wonder what that's going to be all about. But I mean, it's all about running for the next office, and that's all it's always been.
Well, and the book, more than name recognition, it gives prospective candidates a chance to set forth their personal platforms as opposed
Right.
to the old days when you'd wait for the party convention to decide on a platform and something on which to run. But you mentioned Rick Perry. Mm-hmm. And I'm just very curious because this news waxes and wanes based on who's saying what. But your assessment of Governor Perry possibly getting back in a race for president?
Well, actually, he told me himself last year that he was going to make a decision this past December on his chances of running for a fourth term, and he did it. And he said he was going to make his decision as well as running for president. Now he's saying it's within the next few months, like all these candidates are saying. But again, he is very popular now, considering what has happened in Texas. Why shouldn't he? I think he can get past that oops moment he had back in 2011. I don't think that's going to hurt him down the road, but I think he's got one chance to do so. But again, look, everyone is going to run for office for president. Why not? It's an open seat in 2016, and if anything, I think many of these candidates think they don't have a chance of winning or beating like a Bush or a Rubio or a Cruz. But again, it's good for them to get their name out there and sell a couple books.
Javier, some people have criticized Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney as flip-floppers. Are they flip-flopping? Have they been more or less adapting to cultural change, and will that work for them or against them?
I like that, adapting to cultural change. Yes, they flip-flopped. So has Marco flip-flopped on immigration reform, which he talks about in his new book, because his book is about policy. Again, you know, when people start changing their positions, I get it if they were 20-some-odd years old and they change their position, now they're 40, 50, 60 years old. But to change positions within 3 or 4 years, I don't buy it.
Well, we've got about a minute and a half left. And obviously there are a lot of names out there, and this kind of becomes the parlor game for political junkies, who will run and why, and who has a chance to win. But the sentiment was, I think, despite the presence of some young senators like Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and Marco Rubio, that Republicans would look to governors because of their executive experience. In the final analysis, do you think that will win out in the Republican sweepstakes for the nomination in 2016?
Well, all of these potential presidential candidates who happen to be governors tell me the same thing. You need a governor, and senators will tell you the same on their side. Hey, you need someone with a track record, a voting track record. Look, at the end of the day, the Americans will vote on whoever they feel best represents their values and principles. And one thing you should note is that if Rubio gets in, this race between a Jeb Bush and a Marco Rubio in a presidential primary in Florida will suck all of the political air out of the room, and it'll be focused on them. That's something to think about.
It boggles the mind to think about that in Florida, and along the way also imagine if two Texans, if Ted Cruz and Rick Perry were both to run. Ooh, that could really set up some interesting developments in the Lone Star State.
Yeah, but Florida's a swing state. Florida will decide a presidency like it always does, so I put my money on that race.
Fair enough, although Ohio's Governor John Kasich would tell you Ohio's pretty important. Javier Manjarres, thanks so much. America's Forum continues after this.